Thank you so much for being here. My name is Maisa Metcalf. I am a Director of Consumer Engagement here at CLEAR, Clean Energy Economy for the region. And we're so excited to be hosting the second webinar since we launched Solarize on March 1st. So today we're going to be providing a quick overview of how the program is going, some overall results, and then Rich is going to be talking about battery storage systems that folks can get in combination with their solar panels. Okay, so CLEAR manages Garfield Clean Energy, which is basically a collaborative of 9 entities, including all the towns in Garfield County, CMC, and RAFTA. Our mission at GCE is to provide energy efficiency solutions, education, and alternative and renewable energy opportunities to all individuals and organizations in order to build a stronger, more resilient economy benefiting citizens of Garfield County. So anybody in Garfield County needs any help, please give us a call. We're happy to help you out. So Active Energies offers a tiered pricing system that allows greater savings for greater participation. This is when you call all your friends in Garfield County and tell them to get on board. The more people who participate in Solarize, the bigger the rebate will be at the end. So we do have 3 utilities in Garfield County, Holy Cross, Glowman Springs Electric, and Xcel Energy. Both Holy Cross and Glowman Springs Electric offer rebates. Xcel unfortunately doesn't, so that's why GCE is providing these rebates on a first come, first served basis. So the quicker you can get enrolled in Solarize, the better the chances of you receiving this rebate, which is very limited. And we're very happy that the federal tax credit did not go down as scheduled, but it has been maintained at 26% of the purchase, and it will be 26% through 2022. So your actual tax credit will be based on your tax liability. So talk to your tax professional to make sure you qualify. So since we launched Solarize on March 1st, we have received an amazing response from the community. Thank you everybody who's in this webinar that have already enrolled. But we have received in a month over 320 enrollments. 27 systems have been sold. And Rich, maybe you can update these numbers. I don't know if any systems were sold today, but that's the latest number I have. And it's impressive to see that 15 out of the 25 systems do have battery storage systems, and over 200 kilowatt of solar have been claimed through Solarize. And I don't know if it's because of what happened in Texas when there was a power outage and millions of people didn't have power for days, but we have received an enormous amount of questions. So that's why we decided to host this webinar to provide some information on battery backup systems. So we are going.
Slide. Sorry.
What's that?
I don't know if you want to advance the slide.
Yeah, I'm going to. So rebates are going really fast, folks. If you haven't done it yet, please enroll in Solarize today to claim your rebate. That's the link, and we're going to have the link again at the end of the presentation. So now I would like to introduce our speaker, Rich Klubine with Active Energy Solar.
So as of today, we are at 226.8 kilowatts of sold solar. We have 3 additional customers under contract that we're waiting for finance approval that will push us over the 1/4 megawatt tier. So we'll be up to the next tiered rebates for everyone if all of those folks that we received contracts for today that are looking at financing. So I just wanted to update everybody, but we are going to pass the 1/4 megawatt mark in just over a month. So the response has been tremendous. And then, as Maisa has said, battery storage has been a big part. About 50% of people are signing up to get batteries as well.
Sorry, issue with the PowerPoint. 1 second. There you go. Can you see it now?
So, these are I'm going to go through the slides that we presented in the very first Solarize presentation back a month ago, because I know there's some people who are on here who probably weren't there and probably didn't see it. So we'll kind of go through. There will be time at the end of the presentation for question and answers, not only on batteries, but on Solarize in general. And feel free to ask any questions. What I would ask is if you guys can do it via the chat box. That way we can read the questions and it's just easier to go through them.
Yeah, you can either use the chat box or the Q&A box, whichever works.
Oh, sorry, the Q&A box. Okay, so if you want to go to the next slide, I'm going to kind of walk through briefly our power grid. Our power grid is very diverse. If anybody has driven through Glenwood Canyon and noticed, there is a hydroelectric dam operated by Xcel Energy. So we in our area have just about every single form of energy production. So there are coal-fired power plants in Pueblo that Xcel operates, and other utilities. We have wind generation in the Eastern Plains. We have big solar farms scattered throughout Garfield County and the rest of the state. And then there's distributed solar, which is what we're going to talk about now today, which is rooftop solar or ground mounts for residential and commercial. So if you want to go to the next slide. Most people don't think about how power comes to their home. They just plug in their hairdryer and they are able to turn it on. So just to give an education, there is a power plant. There are transformers that step up the power that's produced at those plants. And then you see those giant power lines that transmit it to our homes. It goes through a couple different substations. And then a lot of our power lines are buried underground. And there are a few above ground. And eventually it ends up at your home in your meter and then coming out your outlets when you need to use electricity. If you want to go to the next slide, just want to talk about some of the goals around the country for renewable energy. Colorado has a law that says we're going to be 30% by 2020. The governor has expressed that his desire to be 100% by 2050. And then our utilities, if you want to go to the next slide, Xcel has a goal of being 100% renewable by 2050. And in 2019, the most recent data, they were at 30% carbon free. As a comparison, 2018, they were at 28%, so they only added 2%. So it's really important to utilities like Xcel, Holy Cross, Glenwood Electric, to have homeowners and businesses go solar, go renewable, because it helps them achieve their carbon free mix on their grid. If you go to the next slide, Holy Cross has been the most aggressive utility locally. And I'm not going to discount Glenwood Springs Electric because they've done something unique as well. But Holy Cross announced last year that they wanted to be 100% renewable by 2030. So in just 9 years, they want to be completely powered by renewable energy sources. And part of that path to 100% renewable is the ability to store power that's produced during the day. We talk about solar noon. And so batteries become a big part of it. Holy Cross adjusted their rebates in October, shifted some monies away from solar rebates and put them towards battery rebates. So folks who do batteries in Holy Cross territory are eligible for rebates. If you go to the next slide, Glenwood Springs Electric buys all of their utility power from a wind farm, I believe, in Nebraska. So as of 2019, middle of the year, they were 100% renewable electric. And they're a second city in Colorado to achieve that, and seventh city in the US to commit to buying 100% renewable energy. We'll go to the next slide. This is basic electric. So if you don't remember physics class from high school, here's a crash course. There's a difference between energy and power. There are different parts of a solar array or solar system. And then there's also just talking about, you'll hear me speak about grid tied and net metering throughout this presentation. So if you go to the next slide, power is the rate at which work is done. So we talk about kilowatt hours. So that's energy over time. So kilowatt is the measure of energy, and that's the ability to do work. And then how long you do that work is what power is. So that's basic. So the potential energy of a desktop computer is 200 watts. If you use that computer for 10 hours, you've used 2 kilowatts of power. So that's just your basic. Go to the next slide. Here's where I geek out a little bit. I have a degree in chemistry, and this is my jam. So all you need to know is light hits a solar panel, and it's made of silicon, 2 different kinds, negative and positive. And when that light hits that panel, electrons are excited and they flow. So what's produced on your roof is DC, or direct current power. And DC power is the same as a battery. It flows one way. Now the power in your home, if you go to the next slide, actually flows both ways. So what happens is, in a solar array, you have solar panels that collect light energy. The power optimizers in the SolarEdge platform basically clean that energy up. So they make it so it's much more usable and controllable by the inverter. The inverter that's mounted on your home converts that power to AC power, which is alternating current. So the energy that comes out of your outlets, so you plug in your hairdryer or your microwave, it's alternating current, and it cycles 60 times a second, or 60 hertz. And it's typically made by spinning machinery, so hydroelectric dam, or a like a coal-fired power plant actually boils water and spins turbines. So that's how you get cycles. So the inverter basically does that for you in your home, converts DC power to AC power, not unlike plugging in a converter in your car to charge your phone, or to charge something, you know, that uses a plug. If you go to the next slide, just want to show you how energy flows within a solar array. A lot of people ask, oh, well, the power's just going out on the grid and they give me credit, and how does that work? This is what's called a grid-tied system. The solar panels produce energy. It's converted from DC to AC by the inverter. Depending on your utility, it may or may not require a production meter. That's to track how much energy is being produced, solar energy. And then it feeds into your electric panel. So if it's noon and your solar array is cranking out power, and you start the laundry, and you've got an electric dryer that's drying your clothes, that's called a load. So you're consuming power at that point. If the solar panels are producing enough to offset those loads, it actually feeds the power needs in your home first. And if you have excess power, it actually spins your net meter backward and goes out on the grid. So net metering is a law in Colorado that says that a utility has to give you credit on a one-to-one basis for what you produce or what you overproduce. So during the daytime, we design systems that produce more power than you need instantaneously. They spin your net meter backwards, and obviously the sun goes down in the evening. And what happens is, during the day, your meter is spinning backwards, and at night it spins forwards. And the goal is at the end of the year, the meter hasn't moved one way or the other. You've produced enough power on your home to power your house for the entire year using net metering. Okay, if you go to the next slide. So how much do we pay for electricity? Now, depending on utility, it's somewhere between, you know, and also your rate. So commercial properties have lower rates, but they also have demand charges based on how much you consume in a set period of time. But on average, the average homeowner, whether it's Xcel or Holy Cross or Glenwood Electric, pays about 11 cents per kilowatt hour. We talked about kilowatt hours before when I talked about that computer. So if you use your computer for 18 hours a day, 360 days a year, and it costs you 11 cents per kilowatt hour, that computer is costing you $163 roughly per year to operate. The average home uses about 11,000 kilowatt hours a year. So most people are spending about $100 a month or $1,200 a year on power. Okay. Next slide shows a screenshot of an Xcel energy bill. There's lots of different charges and lots of different kind of parts of that cost of power. What you see in the service and facility and some other charges is a connection fee. So whether you have solar or not, you will still get a bill from your utility, and that's because you have to pay for line upgrades, service, maintenance, those sorts of things to be connected to their grid. But if you go to the next slide, this is actually a snapshot of my home. I happen to live in Holy Cross area, and I have a solar array on my house. I pay $12.24 a month, and that's my connection charge. And what you see down at the bottom, $3,942. So this was my January bill. or actually, sorry, the month of January, what I received in February 1st, that I had a solar bank. So I had produced more power in the last year than I had consumed. And so my solar bank was 3,900 kilowatt hours. Now in February, my roof is completely covered in snow and my solar array is not producing. So I am using that energy and basically withdrawing that energy from my solar bank over the winter. And usually at the end of the year, there's several hundred kilowatt hours left over. Holy Cross zeroes it out and writes generally a very small check. It's the cost of their avoided power. I think it's 3 or 4 cents per kilowatt hour. And then other utilities will allow you to roll that over in subsequent years. So it depends on the utility that you're working with. If you go to the next slide, this is a representation of if you got solar, but we couldn't fully offset your electricity bill. So the yellow line on the bottom is the energy produced from your solar array. It's flat. And what that means is you're capped. You basically you're producing your own energy. You pay for that energy up front when you pay for the system, but whatever energy is produced over its lifetime is essentially free to you. The orange line is it with solar if we can't fully offset it. And this example gives about 85%. So we can offset about 85%. You'll still have an energy bill over time, but it's a lot less. If you didn't have solar, what you're looking at is is all the area under in the blue is that on average, historically, since about 1960, electricity rates have risen about 4% per year. Some years they go up a little bit more, some years they stay flat, but that has been the average inflation of electricity. So essentially by going solar, you're locking in your utility costs if you can offset all of your usage with a solar array at today's pricing, and it should never go up if your array is sized correctly and we have enough room on your roof. Now we're going to kind of shift gears and talk about batteries because it's been talked about, right? You have lots of people in Texas who didn't have power for weeks and weeks and weeks. Is that a likelihood around here? More often, or more likely not. But a lot of people have talked to us about the fact that there were articles in the paper when we had Lake Christine fire that the town of Aspen almost lost power for a very long time because the power poles were burning underneath the transmission line. So what can batteries do for you? Are batteries right for you? How do we look at that? And so we're going to look at A, what a battery does, and B, what a battery costs and what you can get out of a battery. And then that decision is up to you. So if you go to the next slide. So how do batteries work and what are the benefits? And then the economics. Sorry, I talked through that slide without actually looking at it. Go to the next slide. So a battery is like a generator, right? So battery stores power. A generator generates power by burning fossil fuels, but a battery stores power that's already been produced, and ideally from a solar array. So the difference between a battery and a generator is you can size batteries and generators to power your whole house or to power critical loads. That is up to the homeowner. Batteries are cleaner and run with solar. Generators typically run off fossil fuel, whether it's natural gas or even gasoline for the portable ones. So we're talking about battery backup for grid-tied systems, not off-grid. So if your home doesn't have electric lines running to it, that's a whole different consideration for an off-grid battery system. To have electricity, you either got to have solar with a battery or solar alone or a generator if you don't have electric service from utility. So the focus of this conversation is going to be on battery backup for grid-tied systems. So what can batteries power? So if you go into the next slide, so batteries are intended for backup power or self-consumption at night. Self-consumption is not a big issue here because we don't have time of use rates, but in states like California, Arizona, Hawaii, a lot of people have batteries, so they store the power during the day and then they use it at night. And the reason for that is in a state like California, their net metering law says that you have to put 4 kilowatts of power on the grid to get 1 back at night. So you lose 75% of your power generated. So for a lot of people at night, the utility cost, we talked about 11 cents a kilowatt hour here. In California, it's in the 20s. So 22, 26 cents kilowatt hour. In Hawaii, it's 40 plus cents per kilowatt hour. So people want to store that cheap energy that they're producing on their home in a battery and use it at night instead of paying 26 cents per kilowatt hour. So that's where the kind of self-consumption model comes. What I will say about our utilities locally, we're not quite there yet in terms of time of use. There are pilot programs with multiple different utilities that are exploring this. So that may be coming in the future, but I can't say one way or another. Right now, what we've got is a one-to-one net metering, and then battery backup supplies power in the ideal sense right now if the grid goes down. Now, we have very reliable grids. I believe Holy Cross's grid on average for a homeowner goes out 20 minutes a year in an aggregate. Now, if you live in a rural area and there's one line coming in, you know, that it may be higher for somebody more rural than somebody in kind of a more urban or dense environment. So it depends on where you live, but on average, it's about 20 minutes a year that the power goes out. And I just remember that from attending Holy Cross annual meetings every year. So typically a battery, we would set up to do what's called critical loads. So the homeowner would choose what's important to them. So typical loads, we'll get into those on the next slide, but appliances, lights, security, internet, those are typical loads that people want to have in a grid outage. So, and in this day and age, a lot of our customers said, I think I'm going to be working from home for quite a while with COVID. So it'd be nice to make sure I still have internet access. You know, my router's powered. I've got, you know, power to my computer outlets and things like that, so I can continue working. So when the grid does go down, we would install a battery and then a critical load. So we decide with the homeowner what is important to them to have. A lot of times it's, you know, heating controls and appliances like a refrigerator, keep your food cold. And then the other things we talked about. When the grid goes out, there's generally a 5 to 7 second delay, and the battery will kick on and everything will restart on that critical loads panel. When the grid comes back on, the battery will kick to the off position, and then you'll be back on grid power, and then your solar array will kick back on too. So there's protections, and the battery and the inverter and those controls are constantly monitoring the grid. Hopefully I'm making an impact. I don't know if you guys can hear my phone ringing off the hook here, but I'm sitting in my office. So sorry, I'm not answering the phone. If we go to the next slide, we talked a little bit about what batteries can power. So if we look at this, hypothetically, the Smiths, they lose power from the utility several times a year. Each time the power is out for about a day. Probably not the case in our neck of the woods, but to give an example, if you have a 10 kilowatt battery bank and it's powered by solar, if you have a 5 kilowatt solar array, it would take 2 hours at full sunshine to charge your battery every day. What would that power? So if it's cloudy, a battery would cover their needs on the refrigerator, microwave, maybe some outlets in the kitchen, and their cable modem for about a day or a day and a half. Right, so it's about battery conservation and using power appropriately and basically sipping it versus chugging it. If the sun is out and your solar array can charge it every day, in this instance, you could go on for days and weeks powering those loads. So you've got basically kind of this recycling of energy in that battery from your solar array. That's how they work together in synchronicity. So what you wouldn't power is your stove or your dryer or electric hot water heater. Those are really intensive loads. They take a lot of power. Some people have decided to do whole home backup or a much larger backup system, but then you're talking about much larger costs. A lot of folks go somewhere between 10 and 16 kilowatts of battery storage in terms of what we're seeing through Solarize. You go to the next one, next slide. How does storage work with solar? I kind of talked about that a little bit, but installation would happen at the same time. And there is additional hardware. So there's a battery and an inverter. Actually, Melissa, can you go back to one more slide?
This one?
No, one more slide, sorry. So I just want to talk about this picture on the left-hand side. That circle there, that's the battery. That's a 10 kilowatt battery. The middle white box is the inverter. This panel in the middle is a critical loads panel. And then on the right-hand side is what's called a battery, a backup interface. And what that is that's the smarts that says, turn it on, turn it off, go to battery power, go to grid power, those sorts of things. But that's what a typical install would look like in your home. We generally need a space about 6 feet wide by 4 feet tall to install a battery in your home. The 16 kilowatt batteries are floor mounted, so they sit on the floor, so it's a little bit less space, but just those are considerations I want people to be aware. These require space to install. So we can scroll forward. Sorry, I just wanted to give that representation of what it looks like for somebody. So I talked about this. We'll just skip through and go to the next slide. So how is it sized? So we measure it in kilowatt hours. Maesa sent me an email from somebody today who was wondering, hey, I've got an irrigation pump and it's a 20 amp pump. It's 240 volts. How long can a battery run that pump? So at 20 amps, 240 volts, that's 4.8 kilowatts of power needed to run that. If you look at a 10 kilowatt battery, you have a little over 2 hours running that pump continuously to pull water out of the ground. So what we do is we sit down with a homeowner based on your current usage that we know from your utility. We talk about what types of loads that you want to have in a grid outage. And then we kind of talk about, okay, this is what we think a good size battery would be. You can add batteries later, but generally we have these types of conversations. So they're a little bit more in depth in saying, hey, I want solar and I want to offset my bill. We get into how you're using energy, right? And this is a conversation that's really important, to understand. So pumps, those sorts of things, control for your, you may have a natural gas furnace, but you also have power to your thermostat. So your furnace won't work if there's no power to the thermostat. So those are the types of things that we talk about, and our solar consultants will talk about with a homeowner. Okay, so we'll go on to the next slide. There's two different types of batteries, AC coupled and DC coupled. AC coupled would be the batteries are kind of standalone. The DC coupled, the batteries are combined with the solar, so it's on the solar side. What we typically install is DC coupled battery systems, but SolarEdge is very unique in the fact that you can program those batteries to charge from the grid as well. So your inverter will run backwards and charge the batteries DC from AC. So there is flexibility. So SolarEdge is a bit of a hybrid AC coupled, DC coupled system. It's actually DC coupled, but it can operate and charge from the grid as well. So sorry not to get too geeky, but let's go to the next slide. We've had questions about, can we use lead acid batteries? Yes, you can. The problem is the technology that we use, SolarEdge, isn't compatible with lead acid batteries. Also, the other thing about lead acid batteries, they only last 2 to 5 years. So you're going to be replacing batteries. It's like the battery in your car is a lead acid battery. With lead acid batteries, there's sealed ones and there's also non-sealed ones. Those are very cheap. So the cost is very low, but you have to, you actually have to run your own tests. So you have to do specific gravity tests on the fluid in there. You have to top them off with deionized water. So there's lots of maintenance and they slowly discharge. The maximum discharge on a lead acid battery is about 50%. So of the energy that's stored, you only get 50%. So to equal a lithium ion battery that you can discharge at close to 99 or 100%, so you get all 10 kilowatts, to get that same, you'd have to have 20 kilowatts of lead acid batteries. That's a lot of weight. Think how heavy lead is if you've ever had to change the battery in your car. Lithium ion, it's much higher energy density, lower cost. There's zero maintenance. It just sits on your wall, and it's a much smaller footprint. There's some other batteries and newer technologies that are coming out, but we're like kind of the standard is lithium ion. There's a couple different chemistries. The lithium ion batteries are lithium iron phosphate, LiFePO batteries. If for anybody who is interested in chemistry, like I said, I got a degree in it because I'm a nerd. Okay, so we'll go on to the next slide. So we talk about space requirements. This is kind of a small lead acid battery system. It's on a rack. And then you've got a photo of two 10 kilowatt Tesla batteries. They're about the same size as the LG batteries that are compatible with Solar Edge. So there's a huge difference in terms of space and where we can put them. The batteries, lithium ion, can be mounted outside, but not where we live because it gets too cold. They operate from 32 degrees to about 100 degrees, and they like to be at a constant temperature. So typically they'll be installed in a garage or a basement, something like that, and then we'll determine the best place for that for the individual customer. So let me go to the next slide.
We did have a question come in. It might be good to address now, but can you speak briefly to the environmental impact of batteries?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big issue. Batteries can be recycled. So let me say that batteries can be recycled, and the recycling technology is getting much better. But there is a very large environmental impact for mining lithium. Right, lithium is a heavy metal, and it's used in these batteries. Iron, those sorts of things. So it does take mining resources. People ask me, what's the benefit of a solar array, and how long does it become net neutral? So in terms of the energy that goes into building solar, like the components that go into a solar array, and how long it operates for. So to basically recover the energy deficit for creating solar panels and wire and inverters and things like that, it's about 2 years. With a battery, it's about 3 to 4 years in terms of the energy input to create one and then to get it out. These batteries have a warranted life cycle of about 10,000 charge cycles, 6 to 10,000 charge cycles, depending on the manufacturer. And if you think about 10,000 charge cycles, if you do it every single day, 365 days a year, it's like 27 years. And in anything, like you buy a car, you have 5 years or 100,000 miles, whichever happens first. That's the way these warranties go, but they can charge and discharge quite a bit. So generally speaking, 10 to 12 years life on a lithium iron phosphate or a lithium ion battery. I hope I answered that question. Like, it's not great, but there's an environmental impact to using fossil fuels and all of those things. So there's nothing pure and clean. I mean, even nuclear, we have waste. The sun is a pretty abundant source of power, and we can capture it and recover the energy put in fairly quickly over the life cycle, especially if you consider that solar panels are good for 25 or 30 years, depending on the manufacturer's warranty. I hope I answered that question.
Good. Thanks, Rich.
There is another question. I'm seeing it: a significant risk of fire with lithium batteries, history of batteries, fires on planes, that sort of thing. We have not seen issues with that with these specific batteries. If you think about a Tesla or even one of these batteries, and you can see my screen, I don't have a battery with me, but if you think of a Duracell C-cell battery, the batteries that go into this, it's basically a bunch of those, right? So it's a stable technology. You've got hundreds and hundreds of those. They're called sub-C batteries, so they're a little bit smaller, and they have this very specific voltage. That's what's inside these batteries. So these are very safe versus the batteries on like the Samsung phones that were blowing up on planes. Those are it's basically fiber. Sorry, I cut my finger the other day, but those are basically like very thin sheets of material. And when you have the problem on planes is that they expand and contract based on temperature and elevation and things like that. That was breaking the bonds, and you were getting arcing and sparking. These are stable. They're going to be at the same elevation. They're going to be at generally the same temperature, so they're much, much safer. But there's always a risk with anything, crossing the street, anything like that. But so what I'll say is these are pretty safe. Sorry, I can go off on a tangent. I like all of this stuff. So siting situations, we talked about this, generally in a garage or a basement, somewhere where it's generally temperature controlled. I mean, my garage isn't heated, but I've got batteries in there because my garage doesn't get below 30 degrees because it's pretty well insulated. I've got an insulated garage door, and they sit at the back of my garage. Let's go to the next one, operations and maintenance. And we'll specifically talk about lithium ion batteries because that's what we can do. We can do lead acid, but it's going to be a bit more expensive and complicated to do that because it doesn't work with what we've kind of agreed upon pricing wise with Solarize and the Solar Edge platforms that we use. But a typical lithium ion battery is 10 years. And so, like I said, with a car, it's like 5 years or 100,000 miles. These are 10 years or maybe 6,000 charge cycles. 6,000 charge cycles is about 17 and a half years of charging and discharging. And then our company, Active Energy Solar, our warranty for all of our systems, solar and battery, on our workmanship and the wiring and the hardware that we put in is 5 years. Industry standard for solar companies is a year, sometimes 2. So this is, we'll take care of you when it comes to warranty work. Let's go to the next slide. It is important insurance. So the utility, when you sign up for Solarize, we ask for a copy of your insurance policy, because all the utilities, you sign an interconnection agreement, they want to make sure that you have enough insurance that if, say, your house burns down, you can replace the solar array, because they give the ability to connect to their grid with solar. They take what's called renewable energy credits, or RECs, and that's what they report to the federal government to say that we have a higher percentage of renewable energy on our grid. So check with your insurance carrier about having batteries in your home. It's just a smart thing to do. And also, I encourage people to tell your insurance carrier, hey, I just put a $25,000 solar array on my home. I want to make sure that that is covered. The other things, so when it comes to permitting, utility requirements, installer qualifications, we take care of all of that for you. Equipment availability. What I will say right now, we have a standing order with our suppliers on batteries. People who are getting batteries, we have a few that are coming in the next week or two that we can install, but a lot of because there's been such a high demand for these batteries, we're looking at about a 4-week lead time to get a battery. But saying that, building permits, state permits, those sorts of things are taking 2 to 3 weeks. So generally speaking, we will have the equipment to install on your home if it includes a battery in the same general time that we'll be installing your solar. The other thing is EVs. In Europe, you can plug your EV in and give the utility control of the battery in your EV, and they can pull power from it, and they'll pay you for that. So EVs run off batteries. The systems that we sell, without batteries, you can add an EV charger, and then with batteries, you can add an EV charger too. So that is an option if you have an electric car or you're considering getting an electric car. The other thing that I will say about this is you can do solar now and plan on doing batteries, so you can set yourself up with the right inverter so you don't have to replace an inverter in the future if you do want to add batteries, or you can do all of the above. So there's options. We want to talk with you about it and make sure that you're making the right decision for you. So if you go to the next slide, part 2, economics. Let's go to the next slide. So I just talked about you can do battery storage with solar, or you can do it later. So we basically future-proof your system. And in order to do that, you would have to get an upgraded inverter. Those inverters, depending on the size of them, cost an extra $500 to $1,000 to basically have a battery-ready inverter. But that saves you the hassle of having to replace the inverter in the future if you do want to get a battery. If you choose to say, hey, I want to do solar now and I want to make sure I can do a battery in the future. That's what I did in my home. I installed solar at my house several years ago, and now just installing batteries. So just want to throw that out there. I did that for myself. So the next slide talks about how batteries are priced. First, you've got the cost of the battery, right? So there's a cost per kilowatt or cost per kilowatt hour, depends on the different type of battery and the inverters and things like that. We only use one. We use LG Chem batteries. So if you've heard of LG, they make TVs and washers and dryers and refrigerators and all that stuff. They're a very big company. They make batteries too, and they make solar panels and all of those things. Then you've got installation. So batteries have to be installed by a master electrician. Those guys aren't cheap. We have a master electrician on staff and a couple of apprentices and residential wiremen that assist. So it takes our electrician and a standard install of a battery about 25 to 35 hours of labor to install a battery in the inverter in a battery system. So it's not cheap. maintenance, depending on the type of your battery. If you have lead acid batteries, there's lots of maintenance. If you have lithium ion batteries, there's little to none. And then if you replace your battery in 10 years and literally unplug it, pull it off the wall, plug a new battery in and replace it, you won't have all of the other costs outside of just hardware and some minimal labor. So let's go to the next slide. This is an example of our pricing for a 10 kilowatt and a 16 kilowatt battery. You can buy multiples and things like that, and it gets cheaper kind of as you go up. But our average cost for installation is about $5,000 to install a battery, whether it's a 10 kilowatt battery or a 16 kilowatt battery. That's about what it costs us, including not just electrician labor and things like that, but wire and all of the hardware that goes with it. The battery itself, a 10 kilowatt battery is about $5,500. A 16 kilowatt battery is about $9,000. So I think our pricing right now is about $10,600 for a 10 kilowatt battery and about $14,000 and change for a 16 kilowatt battery. So that's as part of kind of Solarize. If you have a more complicated installation, it will be more expensive. For example, if you want the battery on the opposite side of the house in the basement, we have to figure out how to get the wiring and everything there. So that's a lot more labor and time than if it's in the garage and the solar array is right outside the garage on the roof. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're looking at batteries and where you want to put them. Let's go to the next slide. So this is kind of an important thing for backup power applications. The value of a battery is only when the grid is down or if you choose to do self-consumption at night. And there really isn't cost savings earnings over time. And not to poo-poo batteries, because I believe in them, but what I'm saying is this is like buying insurance for your car. You can get basic insurance to drive. Solar power can be that basic insurance. But if there's an accident or a grid outage, let's say, and you want power, you want to have a higher level of insurance. So maybe you want to have comprehensive insurance and towing and rental car and all of that. Batteries provide that extra layer of insurance in the case of an outage. That's where the value of a battery is. It's really about your personal preference. Is it important to you to have power if the grid goes out? So get off my soapbox. The next slide talks about the tax credit. Batteries qualify for the federal tax credit if they are installed with solar. So if you install solar and your battery costs $10,600, you would get 26% of that $10,600. So you'd get about $2,700-ish, maybe $2,800 through the math as a tax credit in the same way that you would get $2,600 if your solar array costs $10,000. So the requirement is it's got to be charged from the solar and the controls are in the inverters. And typically most people don't charge from the grid, but it has to be charged at least 75% from your solar array to qualify for the tax credit and be considered part of the solar. Let's go to the next slide. Here's a beautiful array looking at a ski hill. We're going to get back into Solarize. Hold on to your questions or put them in the chat or the Q&A for later. But I just want to come back to Solarize in general and talk about the process of going solar through the Solarize program. Right now, I'll look on my little sheet here. We've had over 320 people sign up for the program in the first month. We're at 320 exactly as of today. So basically you can go on Garfield Clean Energy or Google Solarize Garfield County and sign up. We'll get an email, we'll put you on the list, and then within a day, our solar consultant, Eric Van Wagenen from Active Energies, will contact you, and you'll also get a contact from Maes's team about talking about energy audits and things like that. What we do need from a homeowner is the last 12 months energy consumption. That's how we size a system. There's a limit of 120% of your current 12-month consumption that we can build a solar array that will produce no more than that amount. So that's the most important piece of information that we need to build the right size system for you. Eric will reach out, schedule a site visit with you, and get on the calendar. He'll come out, take a look at your electrical system. He'll take a look at your roof, and then he'll build a customized proposal for your home, for your needs based on your usage, and then deliver that proposal to you. There's no commitment at this point. You don't have to spend any money. This is all free at this point. If you say, yes, I want to go solar, we'll send you a contract, you sign, and then you're committed to spending the money. You can pay cash, there's financing options. And let me say this, right now, about half of the people who signed up for Solarize are getting some sort of a loan for solar. And I've looked at what they're paying for the utility bill and what they're paying for their solar loan when it's all installed. It's no money out of pocket. Generally speaking, it's a few dollars less, $5–10 less a month to get a loan. So it's really cost effective, and can save you money generally. So once somebody signs a contract for solar, we start putting together electrical plans and submit plans for permitting within 4 days of that contract signature. Depending on where you live, it can be your local municipality, say City of Glenwood Springs, or it could be a state inspection. Depends on who does that, and then building and things like that. So we file all of those permits. Basically what the homeowner needs to do is provide a signature authorizing us to operate on their behalf. So we submit all of those. Typical utility approval and the approval for permits takes anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks. And the installation for your system is scheduled generally 6 to 7 weeks from your contract date. That gives us time to do all of this work in the interim. An installation for a typical solar array, and when I say typical, it's about 7.5 to 8 kilowatts in terms of size. Well, let's see, right now we're at about 250 kilowatts and we have 30 customers. So it's right about there, about 8 kilowatts per system that we've done so far in Solarize. Installation takes 1 to 2 days. And our electrical interconnection, so our electrician will come out and do his side of things. After the install, we get it inspected, it passes inspection, and then we submit all the proper forms to utility. The utility will come out, set the meter, do their tests, and then your system is up and running. To wrap it all up in a nice bow, we will schedule a final walkthrough with the homeowner where we'll give you your warranty information. We'll actually set up the monitoring. So each system comes with remote monitoring for your system. And that way you can see it if you're on vacation in Bora Bora or if you're down the street. So there's apps for your phone, and then there's online access. And we recommend that homeowners check on their system from time to time. We passively monitor all of the systems, but if there's issues, it's nice to get a call from a homeowner saying, hey, there's something wrong. That way we can act quickly. Yeah, so that's kind of the process start to finish. I'll look at this screen here because it goes all the way to the bottom. If we can go to the next slide. This is kind of where we're at. This is a slide. The cost of solar has come down significantly. In the past 8 years, solar has dropped by almost 80% in terms of cost. So now is literally one of the best times to go solar because the tax credit's still at 26%. The savings with the Solarize pricing averages about $1,000 off of kind of retail pricing because our company, when we submitted our RFP to the Solarize program, based on volume, we can do solar cheaper, and those savings are passed on. So it's like, does anybody need 20 toothbrushes? No, but we all buy 20 toothbrushes at Costco because we get them for a lot cheaper. So by you and your neighbors all going solar, and right now we're at a $300 rebate back, the solar is going to be even cheaper. So if you're doing it, encourage your neighbor to do it because it'll save you money in the long run. Let's go to the next slide. This is super exciting. I just checked our numbers and we are sitting at 200 and, check right now. We're sitting at 226.8 kilowatts. So right on that cusp of 250 to get us to the next tier. We have contracts in hand. We're waiting for financing approval. That'll put us at about 255 kilowatts. So we expect when those financing approvals come through tomorrow or early next week, that we'll be at $300 guaranteed for everybody who's signed up for solar. I'm also very happy to announce when we launched Solarize Garfield, there were 18 Xcel rebates. There was such a tremendous response. Maisa and her team went back to the county and they approved additional rebates. So they approved an additional 12 rebates. So now there's 30 Xcel rebates. And I'm just gonna go through here. Right now, there are 13 rebates spoken for in Xcel. And there are let's see, 11 of 17 rebates spoken for in Glenwood Springs Electric. And then Holy Cross, there is no limit on their rebates because they have their own rebate program. So the requirement to get a rebate, let me just say this, is a home energy assessment. And Active Energies, our company, we will actually subsidize up to $100 of that energy assessment for you. So we want people to look at not just going solar, but look at being more responsible energy users in general. Maisa, you want to go to the next slide? We talked a little about this before with batteries, but solar qualifies for a federal tax credit. The next slide, let's talk about money. Based on the Solarize pricing on an average size system of about 7.5 kilowatts, the total cost of the system, and this is assuming that it offsets more than 100%, so 110% of your electrical usage, the cost of the system is a little more than $22,000. When you look at the Solarize rebate of $1,500 and potentially increasing next week to $300, and the federal tax credit, you're paying just a little bit more than $15,000 for your array. So you're saving almost $7,000 off the cost of solar. And with that math, the solar array on your home will pay for itself in about 9 years. And it's like putting that money in the bank and getting an interest rate of 9%. So the bank paying you 9% per year for the life of the system. There's a different number crunch with Holy Cross because their rebates are a little bit more generous. That's why they're excluded from the Solarize rebate. But this average size system, same price. The Holy Cross rebate is actually $3,500. And that's something that their membership agreed upon. And they actually have a 2% surcharge on everybody's bill that funds these rebates. And then you've got the Active Energy solar rebate, the federal tax credit. So you save an additional about $2,000, $1,800 with Holy Cross. So the ROI is a little bit better and the payback is a little bit shorter. Let's go to the next slide. So people ask, well, you know, home improvement projects, if I remodel my kitchen, it costs me $50,000. I'm not getting $50,000 out of that when I sell my home. Solar is really unique because that solar array that's worth $22,000 is worth $22,000, but you're only paying $15,000 for it. When your house gets appraised, the appraiser will say, oh, it's a $22,000 solar array. So you're actually buying something at a discount and your home is worth more. There's studies out there that show that homes with solar, a study published by Zillow last year, showed that homes with solar sell for 4.1% more than homes without, and they sell about 30% faster than homes without solar. Because home buyers are looking at homes in all the different aspects, and if they say, hey, this home doesn't have an electricity bill, that's a huge benefit to me over the lifetime of me living there. Let's go to the next slide. Let's talk about the environmental impact. Solar is awesome. So an average solar array avoids almost 7 tons of coal being burnt. And that coal would put almost 14 tons of CO2 into the atmosphere. The other thing that most people don't think about is that water is consumed when you produce energy and transport energy. So you're saving 9,500 gallons. And we all know right now, I look at the newspaper, we're at about 85% of snowpack of normal. So we are looking at a potential drought year. There's also miles that are driven to transport fuel and all of those things. So an average solar array avoids 20,000 miles being driven, or planting 45 new trees every single year for the life of that system. So the environmental benefit is just exponential over the life of that system. And you can actually see that on the monitoring portal. It actually gives you kind of, hey, you've produced a megawatt of power this year, and this is how many trees you basically planted by producing a megawatt of power of clean energy. Let's go to the next slide. This is what the monitoring portal looks like. This is just an example, but you can see historically. So my solar array on my house, I installed in my current house is installed in 2017. So I've got 3.5 years of data, and it'll show it in different bars, and it shows it by day. So this is what you can see from an energy production standpoint. Let's go to the next slide. And I want to reinforce, it's not just important to get solar and put a Band-Aid on your energy consumption. Doing things like LED lighting, you know, bulbs that consume 88% less, or excuse me, 86% less energy than a regular incandescent bulb. They last 25 years. There's huge benefits to doing other unique things. So that's what the energy audit or the energy assessment will provide you, is with basically a home improvement punch list, right? It'll say, hey, you can improve your insulation in your attic. You can improve your weather stripping around your doors. You can replace your windows with a more efficient, window, or change out your light bulbs, or your furnace is going to need to be replaced in the next, few years. You might consider a very high energy efficient furnace, or maybe even a ground source heat pump. Those are all options. So we want to make sure that homeowners are educated through this process. And that's what that home energy assessment does. Let's go to the next slide. And there's a ground mount. So this is a ground mount that we've installed. Pretty stuff. And I'm going to hand the microphone back to Maisa. My presentation is complete. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rich. Really appreciate it. Since we don't have any questions and we still have a couple minutes left, I would like to invite Lisa Reed with Holy Cross to talk about an additional opportunity for their customers. So Lisa, can you unmute yourself? Lisa? Lisa, can you hear us?
Yeah, I got it unmuted finally. I wasn't able to find the unmute button. I had it on the full screen. So Maisa, thank you so very much. My name is Lisa Reed. I'm with Holy Cross Energy. Rich really provided you with a lot of great information. So awesome job, Rich. Holy Cross Energy, we're happy to support Solarize Garfield County. We really look forward to working with Active Energies. They're one of our preferred solar installers, and we'll work in any way to make sure that our members in Garfield County just have a nice, smooth transition to solar energy and storage. As Rich mentioned, we've got incentives for solar energy that are eligible for our Garfield County members, along with incentives now in your storage installation. So Rich will talk to you about those if you decide to look at the storage as an option. Coming soon, your storage system will allow you to take advantage of those time of day rates. We're in the process right now of testing our final billing so that you can utilize your battery to self-consume during peak hours and save significantly on those peak hour rates. So if you choose time of day and you self-consume during the peak hours, and Holy Cross's system, that's between 4 and 9, and you utilize the majority of your power and charge your battery during solar hours and off peak, you're going to see a significant savings over our standard rate. One program that we have just introduced, and this is our Power Plus program, in which a fixed monthly payment pays for your resilience. So you get the backup power in an outage while we control the batteries to lower our peak demand and absorb renewable oversupply. Both of these things are going to keep our power supply costs low and keep your rates low. Average residential rate at 10.5 cents with no demand charges through Holy Cross Energy. By keeping our power costs low, we can continue to keep those rates. We've just announced that we'll have no increase in rates in 2021 to keep supporting our membership during these little bit tougher times. And as we continue to increase our renewable supply in our power, we'll continue to try to keep those rates low for you. So if you do want to go to our website and check out our Power Plus program, it is a first come, first served basis. It does have availability, and we can give you the details there.
Great, thank you, Lisa. And Rich, we do have a question that just came in. If roof repair or replacement needed prior to adding solar panels, does the 26% tax credit apply to that also?
We get this question a lot. I am not a tax professional. Let me just put that out there. There's a lot of things I am, but that is not one of them. What I can say is if we are up on your roof and we say, you might want to have your roof looked at prior to installing solar, because obviously if you install solar and your roof needs to get replaced, the solar has to come off and get reinstalled. We will do that for you, and we have done that for customers. And so as a company, we only charge time and materials for that work. So if your solar goes on and in 5 or 6 years, you need to have your roof replaced, the average cost is about $1,500 to $2,000 for an average size system. So we keep that cost low because as a company, we believe we're entering into a relationship with our customers for 25 or 30 years, as long as their solar array is on their roof. So let me say that. We have had many customers over the past several years approach their tax professionals and say, hey, I'm doing solar and I also need to do my roof. That's a determination between you and your tax professional, but we have seen people take that tax credit when a roof replacement is required in order to do a proper solar array. So that's what I would say. So we, for those customers, we have included on their final bill a statement saying the homeowner replaced their roof at a cost of X, and then that's between them and their tax accountant or tax preparer. So I can't promise it, but we have seen it occur. You need to check with your tax professional.
Great, thank you, Rich. I don't see any other questions, and it is 6:32. So this concludes our webinar. If you haven't done already, please enroll in Solarize. You can go to garfieldcleanenergy.org/Solarize, or you can call our office 970-704-9200. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good to see you, Lisa. Good to see you, Maisa.